Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to today's webinar, Investing in Technologies Today to Future-Proof the Workforce for Tomorrow. Brought to you by the Center for Digital Government, Workday, and Government Technology. I'm Harold Tuck, and I'll be your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webinar, this live webcast, is designed to be interactive between you and the presenters. You can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the presentation. Just type your questions into the Ask a Question text area next to the video window, and then click the Submit button. At this time, we recommend you disable your pop-up blockers. You will see a number of widgets on the bottom of the screen as well. During today's webinar, you can connect with your peers via LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. If you are experiencing problems with your media player, you can select the preference link under the video window and choose a different media player. If you are experiencing any other problems, please visit our webcast help guide by clicking on the Help button below the video window. Let's move on to our presentation. For some of you who may not be familiar with the Center for Digital Government, it presents award-winning publications, and it also covers information technology roles in the running of state and local government. The Center for Digital Government also is a national research and advisory institute advising on best practices and technology policies in state and local government. I am joined today by the following speakers, and let me introduce them to you. Nick Castellina, Senior Research Analyst, Business Planning and Execution. Nick does this for the Aberdeen Group's Business Planning and Execution practice. Nick joined Aberdeen in 2010 with his primary research focused on the use of Enterprise Resource Planning, or ERP software. His enterprise application research explores how ERP is used differently across industries and how it can be applied to all roles within the organization. Additionally, Nick leads a yearly study on financial planning, budgeting, and forecasting. Other topics that he covers includes project management, enterprise performance management, business process management, professional services automation, financial management and reporting, and the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. In addition to these topics, Nick plays a major part in the development of the Aberdeen Business Review. Nick holds a Bachelor of Science degree in marketing from Bentley University and a Master's in Business Administration from the University of Massachusetts, Boston, with specializations in finance and marketing. Our next speaker that will follow Nick is Sherry Amos, Managing Director, Industry Strategy, Education and Government for Workday. Sherry brings over 20 years of experience in her role leading industry strategy for education and government industries for Workday. She is responsible for working with customer partners and industry influencers to bring high value and next generation cloud solutions to the marketplace. Prior to joining Workday, Sherry led industry strategy teams for SAP for all regulated industries, including state and local government, education, federal government, utilities, and healthcare. Sherry also previously held executive positions with Oracle and PeopleSoft in strategy and project management and marketing roles. I would like to welcome them both to today's webinar. And let's continue on with the presentation. And as we look at the topic that Nick and Sherry will be discussing with us today, the question remains, the large question, how do you future-proof your workforce? Your workforce is your major cost center. It's essential that you manage it appropriately. there's many different changing requirements, particularly regulatory requirements that you all have to deal with. And you have to deal with those changes with limited resources every day and every year. So we can use analogy of a toolkit. Is your toolkit equipped to manage the workforce for this century? So let's start with what workforce management really means so that we can have a working definition as we hear from Nick and Sherry later on. And that is, it refers to the systems and the processes that you need to use to manage all aspects of your workforce. And I want to emphasize the word all. Regardless of the size of your organization, you need to have the right tool in your toolkit. Because when it comes to creating efficiency in your workforce, an outdated HR system will not and cannot keep pace with the current solutions in the marketplace. And with that, let me bring on our first speaker, Nick Castellina. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks, Harold, and thank you, everybody, for coming to the webinar today. What we're going to go over is a slideshow based on a report that I worked on in conjunction with Workday a few months ago, titled Prepare for the Future, Optimized Workforce Management Strategies with Cloud Solutions. And this is really focused on the public sector, organizations like yours, on how you're managing your workforce, taking care of scheduling, hiring, so on and so forth, to make sure that your organization is prepared to have the resources to attack any initiatives that you're having in the future. And at the same time, managing your longer-term financial plans. So really it's all about bringing together the short-term operational workforce requirements and aligning those with your financials. And this is all done through the unification of financial management and HR data. And then we're going to go a little bit more and talk about how cloud solutions fit into this type of strategy. So we're going to start by talking about what the challenges are, move on to what organizations such as yours are doing that are successful when it comes to preparing for the future through both your technology and your workforce, and then give a few recommendations. So it's really all about planning or future-proofing your organization both on the operational side and on the financial side through the technology that's available to your organization. I'll just very briefly go over who I am, since Harold already did that. I'm Nick Castellina. I'm a research director at the Aberdeen Group in my business planning and execution research practice, meaning I cover a lot of different things, things like ERP, financial planning, financial management, onto some of the more process-oriented things. So really, the topic areas that I cover here at Aberdeen really fall right into place with what we'll be going over today, talking about creating plans for your organization to understand what type of resources you need and how you're going to use those resources to help achieve your goals. So what were some of the key findings in the report that we're really talking about today, which you can, of course, find on Workday.com or also at Aberdeen.com. Some of the key findings are that today's environment challenges public sector organizations to gain better control over workforce spend, make quicker decisions, and be more agile. So really the challenges for these organizations mean that there's tighter constraints around hiring and utilizing your workforce, so you need to be smarter about how you're doing that and planning for the future more effectively. At the same time, you have a need for access to data that will help you make adjustments to your workforce planning and align that with changes in overall financial plans to be more agile and be more effective as an organization so you can make better decisions on the whole. Then we're going to talk about how workforce planning and financial management must be aligned to create an effective organization. So if those in finance don't have insight into your HR needs and your hiring requirements, it's not going to be easy for them to forecast effectively when it comes to margins and revenue and the money coming into the organization. And at the same time, if your workforce doesn't have insight into the data available to finance, they're not going to be able to know exactly what they can do with the resources they have. So to be able to be looking forward, you really have to have a more robust view of what's going on within the organization as a whole. Then we're going to talk about technology and how technology adoption must enable cohesive integration between HR and financial data. In the past, one of the main problems that a lot of organizations have faced, particularly in the public sector, is data silos where there's one system here on the left handling strictly workforce management and another system here on the right handling your financials and your reporting and your accounting and payroll, so on and so forth. So what top-performing organizations you're going to do is actually integrate this data effectively. And then lastly, we're going to talk about how cloud technology can help organizations to future-proof their technology environments and their financial and HR plans. So you're not just future-proofing when it comes to future-proofing the workforce or future-proofing your finance department. You're also future-proofing the technology itself. And I think there's a lot of key components of a cloud solution that fit well into that strategy, and you'll see most of those towards the end of the deck, but really it's all about having a solution that can scale with your business and support it as time goes on and remain compliant at the same time. So now you know what we'll be talking about. I think it makes sense for me to just take a little sidestep and let you understand why you should believe me and tell you a little bit about how the findings that you're going to see here today were put together. So here at the Aberdeen Group, we are a research firm that does primary research based around a variety of business topics, basically helping organizations to understand how they need to improve in any specific process or specific business problem. We have groups based around human resources, groups around supply chain, groups around finance, so on and so forth, as well as a variety of technologies. And we're doing online surveys to help to get some valuable insight into these problems and the solutions to these problems. Of course, we supplement these surveys with end-user phone calls where we're able to put together case studies to get a better picture of what's going on. And throughout those surveys, we have what we call our PACE methodology as well as our best-in-class framework. So first we'll talk about what our PACE methodology actually means. So PACE stands for Pressures, Actions, Capabilities, and Enablers. P for pressures being the key problems that are facing an organization in whatever issue they're trying to solve, whether it's future-proofing the workforce or just about anything else. The A for actions are the key business strategies that organizations are putting into place to combat these pressures. The C for capabilities are the core business competencies that an organization has implemented, whether they're organizational capabilities, process management, knowledge management capabilities, things like the ability to reforecast as market conditions change, things like real-time visibility into the workforce, things like that. And then lastly, the E, the enablers, which is the key business technology that's being used in the face of these challenges. Now, at the same time, we have, as I mentioned, our best-in-class framework. And what we do there is we rate every single survey respondent that takes our survey on a variety of key performance metrics. These can be things like the utilization rates of employees, things like profit margins, things like accuracy of forecasts for revenue. Depending on whatever the report is or whatever the story is, we change up what those KPIs actually are, and you'll see a little bit of what we use for this report later on. So we take every single survey respondent and we rate them on their answers to those questions and place them into three classes based on their average score. The top 20% being the best in class, the middle 50% being the industry average, and the bottom 30% being the laggards. What I'm then able to do is marry the two together and say, best-in-class organizations are more likely to be able to do this. And you're there to take the leap and understand that if you want to be a best-in-class organization, you should be doing the types of things that best-in-class organizations are doing. So you'll see a lot of bar charts throughout this presentation where a best-in-class bar is bigger than an industry average or a laggard bar. And that'll tell you that the numbers shouldn't add up to 100. It'll tell you that the best-in-class are more likely as a percentage to have these capabilities, and you should therefore emulate the best-in-class. With that said, after you've heard me drone on about how we do our work, here's actually some of the data that we're going to be going over. And this is a table setter right here when we start talking about some of the pressures that organizations face. And again, all of these questions are based around public sector organizations such as yours. We did this report based on two or three different surveys. And what you see on this slide here is organizations were asked to select their top 2 pressures or drivers when it came to workforce management when they're across all of these public sector organizations. So the top 2 drivers are actually economic conditions that require better control over labor spend and the need to improve workforce planning capabilities. So what this really tells me is that in today's economic conditions and government environment, funds are tough to come by. So organizations need to really be able to do all they can with the money that's available to them. And an integral part of that is workforce management. So you want to make sure you have enough employees when you need them, not too many when you don't, and you want to make sure you have the right employees in place to do the things that you need them to do. That's very difficult because as your organization grows or in a volatile market, it becomes very difficult to determine how many employees are needed, also the skill sets of those employees and the skill sets required for their roles. So really here, these 2 top pressures show that public sector organizations are having a lot of difficulty and need some help when it comes to workforce management, both for the near and the long term. Next, we have another slide where we ask organizations a similar question. This comes from a survey more focused around the unification of finance and HR and what some of their biggest problems are. Again, this reinforces what we talked about before, how public sector organizations must reduce costs. Again, they need to be able to do as much as they can with what they have or with the funds that are available to them. Requiring every single decision, whether it's workforce management or outside of the organization when you're talking about investments in other resources. You need to have a better view of what you've got and what you need. Another thing that's particularly important for public sector organizations is regulatory reporting requirements. There is increased scrutiny on these type of organizations. You're accountable to the public. So you're going to have trouble if you're not able to provide this data to the extended enterprise and those outside of the organization. Exceedingly important, and that I'll tell you, that bar is a lot higher on this chart than it is on a lot of other types of industries and organizations. So really those are the top 2 when it comes to nonprofit organizations. But then some of the other stuff you see here is the inability to quickly, inexpensively react to business change without major disruption. So that's what happens when you're dealing with a market where costs are tight or where there's constantly changing regulatory compliance issues and delays in decision making from a lack of timely information. So what's really happening here is that the need for short-term and long-term planning is especially hindered by the fact that costs need to be kept in check. Organizations need more visibility into the data that's available to them, and they need to be able to align that data across the organization from both a workforce management standpoint and also a financial standpoint. So what type of tools are actually in place already when it comes to nonprofit organizations? We see labor budgeting and forecasting solutions. 53% currently already have these types of solutions in place. So they're able to get a good idea of what's going on across the organization when it comes to workforce management, but you see that fewer amount of organizations actually have the ability to integrate data between financial applications and HCM applications. So they're not fully providing a robust view across the organization. So those at the top, or I don't want to say in the top, but those that are off in finance don't have a good idea of the needs of the workforce. So they're not going to be able to plan effectively for the organization and report effectively as well. At the same time, as I mentioned earlier, those in HR don't have a view down the other way of the street. So it's exceedingly difficult when you don't have these tools in place. So we asked the question here to our survey respondents, and this is just kind of another table setter before we go on and tell you a little bit about what organizations are doing when it comes to workforce planning and financial planning. And you'll see that on the next slide. But we ask how organizations are setting their labor budget. Is it based on annual headcount needs, or is it based on are you hiring to your financial forecast, or is it the other way around? About half of organizations say their labor budget is set at an annual basis based on headcount needs. The other half updated on a more regular basis based on business performance data, but less than 10% update continuously based on operational data. So what that's telling me is that their abilities are somewhat inadequate when it comes to these processes. And the data you're going to see later on, what's best for organizations is to have a more robust and a more cohesive view when it comes to doing both of these things. So you need to staff to your forecast, and you need to forecast to your staff. And when there's changes in one, the other needs to change as well. So really you've got to be a more agile organization and a more robust organization when it comes to providing this data to your employees on both sides of the house. And that can be accomplished through a variety of technologies. With that said, what are best-in-class organizations doing to solve this problem? And this is for a broader set of industries, but certainly public sector is included in this, and nonprofit is included in this, to give you a good idea of how organizations of all types that are best-in-class are able to provide a better short-term and long-term plan and an integrated financial and workforce plan. 52% of the best-in-class have the ability to integrate data between financial management and human capital management applications. So they're creating solutions that are able to provide a more full, robust view of the data and make those types of decisions that can help you future-proof your organization from both sides. So understand what your requirements are when it comes to workforce management, and understand what the impact of that workforce is going to have on performance of the organization as a whole. And that's really what top-performing organizations do. They look for solutions that are able to provide that bridge in between both finance and HCM. So what we're going to see going forward is comparing some organizations that have done this to organizations that have not, and see really what the benefits are when it comes to creating that alignment. So forgive me if this is a little difficult to read, but you will be able to see this same exact chart in the report that's available at Workday.com. Unified views enable planning, compliance, and future-proofing. So really, this is what the benefits of combining HR and finance, which is the purple bar, to organizations that do not combine HR and finance data through one single solution. 57% of those that combine HR and finance, in comparison to 22% of those without, have real-time collaboration across departments and divisions. I'm talking about removing those silos that we talked about earlier. So you're not having redundant data, conflicting data, data that can't be rationalized between the two departments, even though those two departments really need to be working together. Having a single solution that does that for you is going to speed up efficiency greatly when it comes to hiring and retiring, as well as reporting when it comes to things like compliance and regular reports. Those with HR and finance are over twice as likely to have a unified view of labor costs and workforce data. So they have a more robust view into some of the data that HR needs, how much it's actually costing the organization to hire these employees, how close you are to your overall labor budget, and also communicating that effectively to finance. Again, is really having a more robust view. Some of the things that organizations are able to do as a result of this include the ability to schedule the workforce based on service needs. So you have a better view of what the needs are outside of HR. you have a better view of what finance is forecasting and how that's going to affect your workforce planning. So then those on your HR staff can feed into that and provide the employees or the resources that the rest of the organization needs based on the long-term and short-term plans. At the same time, having a view such as this is more likely, 67% in comparison to 30%, to provide that ability to monitor regulatory compliance on an ongoing basis. So really, that's absolutely essential as a public sector organization. There's a lot of different reporting that your organization is accountable for that some other industries are not. Having a unified view when it comes to HR and workforce and compliance issues is going to make your organization better able to handle compliance. And then lastly, the ability to easily tailor your solution to support business change. Again, like I said, we're in volatile environments. We're facing increased pressure, cost constraints. Top-performing organizations or organizations that have combined HR and finance in comparison to those that have not also select solutions that are easily tailored. So we're talking about simple solutions. I don't want to say simple. Usable solutions is what I should say. Flexible solutions that can help support your organization going forward. So that goes back to speaking about what I spoke about earlier. You're not just future-proofing your workforce and you're not just future-proofing your finance. You're future-proofing the actual technology that's supporting your organization itself. So you're going to want to look for a scalable solution that's easily tailored. And when we start talking about some of the cloud solutions later on in this presentation, I think you'll get an idea of why that's important or how you can actually solve that problem. So here we, going back to comparing best in class to all others, which is the industry average and the laggards combined, and we're on slide 17 here. Integrated business applications that serve as a complete and auditable system of record. So you have solutions that, again, provide your users all of the data they need to perform their roles, but also at the same time access to any data they need that's tangential to those roles that could still be important to them, removing those silos. This allows you to do a lot of different things, and what best-in-class organizations are more likely to do, 78%, have the ability to integrate and align their forecasts with their cost forecasts. So one significant component of your costs is the workforce. So creating a more cohesive organization when it comes to planning for the future and future-proofing. So let's take a look at what you can do as you create that alignment. And there's, again, we are comparing organizations that have integrated and aligned that information to organizations that have not, so the orange bar versus the red bar. Those that have integrated create a centralized repository of financial and operational performance data, again, combining HR and financial data, doing a better job of measuring how effective your employees are and what the impact is on the bottom line. They're more likely to be able to provide real-time updates to financial metrics. We know that having all this data is great, but it's really ultimately useless if it's not up to date, if it's not real time, because you're going to be making decisions based on old data, and that's the last thing you want to be doing, particularly if you're trying to future-proof your organization. They're also monitoring operational performance data. They're able to identify performance by product line. Well, product line not as important, but salesperson, business unit, down to the individual employee, and that's really the point of that one. To understand how that impacts your organization as a whole. And then a centralized repository of management directives, and those can come from not just management itself, but also from the government or regulatory bodies to help to communicate those issues to those in departments such as finance and HR. So understanding if there are certain requirements when it comes to hiring that you have to fit in with. So here are some of the benefits of alignment, and we've compared those that are aligned to those that are not. They're delivering a greater percentage of reports to decision makers in the time they need them for decision making. They are providing more accurate financial reports, 80% in comparison to 70%. they're making quicker decisions, they have more accurate cost budgets, and they're ultimately, because of the data that they have, they're able to implement their operating margins. 6% increase over the past 24 months for those that are aligned, compared to 2% for those that are not aligned. So really, this is what you want to say the value proposition is of unifying finance and HR and creating an aligned organization, because you're going to be able to make more better decisions as a whole as a result of the data that's available to you. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to talk about how cloud solutions fit into this strategy and why they're important when it comes to future-proofing your organization. And they really fit in quite well when it comes to what we've been talking about today, the unification of finance and HR. The number one reason that mid-market organizations select a cloud solution is a need for collaboration amongst an increasing number of locations and also departments. If you have a need to provide collaboration between finance and HR, cloud's a very attractive way to do that, because it's available to employees no matter where they are, as long as they have access to an internet source, and that really impacts that collaboration. But some of the other things I wanted to point out include need an application that can scale with the business. These cloud solutions are designed to support your organization as it grows or as there are changes to the organization, and that's why you would be looking at a cloud solution that's continuously updated by your software vendor. Also, at the same time, if you have difficulty recruiting IT staff or you can't afford IT staff due to cost restraints, you don't have to worry if you're a nonprofit organization, because a cloud solution will really remove a lot of the burden from your IT staff, because the vendor is supporting that solution itself. So really, there are a lot of reasons to take a look at cloud solutions as a public sector organization that is looking to future-proof because of these reasons, plus the fact that it's easier to implement, so on and so forth, a lot of things that you have heard of about cloud solutions. So to recap before I pass this on to Sherry, what we went over. Today's environment challenges public sector organizations to gain better control over their workforce spend, to make quicker decisions, and to be more agile. Also, workforce planning and financial management must be aligned to create an effective organization. So you need to unify this data. Unified finance and HR is really the key here to provide a more robust view. Technology adoption must enable cohesive integration. And then lastly, cloud technology can help organizations to future-proof their technology environments as well as their financial and HR plans, because how effective that strategy is when it comes to cloud solutions. So my recommendations: build the business case for those that are holding the purse strings when it comes to the solutions. And I think with a cloud solution, that's really going to fit in well. But understand why your organization needs to connect these things. Take a holistic view towards planning. So not just planning financially for the organization, but really planning for the workforce. Look for the connection point between this data. So understand what impacts what when it comes to these two sides of the business. And then identify the technology, whether it's cloud or not, but make sure that you're able to unify this data between the two departments, and that's really what you should be taking a look at. And if you want more information on this topic, the report, which is titled something along the lines of Future-Proof Your Workforce for Tomorrow in Public Sector Organizations at Workday.com. With that said, I'll pass this on to Sherry, and she can tell you a little bit more about Workday. And there will be some questions later on, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. I appreciate that. So what I'm going to share with you today as a part of our talk is building a little bit upon what Nick has opened up with in their great research, and introduce you a little bit to Workday. We'll move through those slides fairly quickly, but we want to come back to the trends that we're seeing in workforce management in the public sector, how that aligns with some of the major shifts in technology. And one of the quotes that we like to start with is a very famous, very smart man, who said really the problems we face today can't be solved at the same level of thinking when we created them. And when we look at the whole area of workforce management and we start to think about this and some of what we're seeing in the marketplace, this really applies to all aspects of policy, process, people, organizational structures. So we're seeing a lot of movement in the public sector really step back and take a look at the entirety of what they're trying to accomplish in building a modern workforce today. And certainly one of the major influences as it relates to the technology is the whole consumerization of IT and how expectations have dramatically changed over the last few years about how people interact with technology. And both citizens and employees want to interact with the same kind of very simple, no training, a very user-intuitive kind of an experience, and this needs to be taken into account today as well. Now, when we look at some of the issues that the IT side struggles with in both education and government, you'll see a lot of the issues are very similar. They may not be the same number on the list, but the explosion of consumer technologies, the expectation that everything will be mobile, the use of social media collaboration tools, embedded business intelligence and big data analytics, and of course cloud services. And IT organizations are really struggling to bring all of these capabilities together in the systems that they support and provide to the business users today. So a lot of this comes into play as to what Workday intended to do when the company was founded. And we were founded about 9 years ago today by David Duffield and Anil Bushri, two very senior, experienced IT executives. You see over the years, Dave founded several companies, including PeopleSoft. Many of you may have those systems still in place today. And always in each case, Dave has a personal commitment and a dedication to the industries of education and government. And so at Workday, we carry that tradition through as well. But when we really started working on the solutions, what we wanted to do was bring all of these technologies that were at play in the consumer world, start with a clean sheet of paper in designing business applications, and ensure that all of those capabilities were truly embedded in a unified environment. And so when you look at Workday Solutions, you will see embedded mobile, you'll see embedded analytics, you'll see very intuitive consumer UI, collaboration and social kind of tools in all of our applications. So what the end user ultimately gets is a solution that is available to them for use on any device of their choosing, whether it's a mobile phone, a tablet, a computer. It's inherently designed to operate that way. Now, when we start to look at really what this means, sort of what the benefits are, it really brings all of these things together in a true cloud solution, a true software as a service solution, where the technologies are constantly embedded. They're native to the solution itself. Innovations are continually being updated. Analytics are embedded, so you always have real-time actionable insight available to you. Now, at Workday, we primarily provide three portfolios of solutions: human capital management, human resource and payroll, financial management, and our latest solution in the education market is a student system. And I'll move quickly through the applications that comprise those, but again, an important point to remember is that all of these are in a unified environment. And what that really means is that all data is accessible real-time across any application or any solution. And Nick talked about the importance of not just integrated data, but accessible data across human resource solutions, whether it's a recruiting solution or your compensation management solution, your budgeting solution in finance, et cetera. And we'll talk about a few examples of why that's meaningful. And so I'll quickly move through these. The slides will be available for you at the end of the session. We just want to give you an idea of the very broad portfolio that we do offer to the marketplace. So to move back one slide here. So after 9 years, and all of our customers, we've delivered 22 updates. Every one of these updates includes innovations, new features, functions, et cetera, on what we call one code line. And this is very important to this concept of future-proofing your technology. What this means is that all customers are always on the current release. There are no prior versions. There are no upgrades, no multi-million-dollar upgrades every few years to get the latest features and functions. So this path of innovation that you're constantly on with a cloud company always keeps you current, and so that, in effect, helps to future-proof the technology that's providing your business solution. Now, when we talk to many of our customers in public sector, and we have state customers, county, city government, higher education as well, a number of these customers, and we're adding more every day, a lot of what we hear that they are dealing with are some of these trends. And so as we talked a little bit before, it isn't just about sort of the systems and the technology, but really looking at policy reform. We've seen states that actually had to change their state constitution in order to modernize some of their HR policies, hiring policies, compensation management policies. We're seeing a lot of government organizations that really want to look now at it's not truly pay for performance, then they really want to start to take a total compensation view of everything that makes up an employee's potential compensation package. And certainly the whole area of agile recruiting and sourcing for many years, a lot of government organizations, their idea of really sort of sourcing talent into the organization would be to develop a job requisition and post it on a website or a job board. So really, there are a lot of HR professionals that haven't really been actively trained in how to source and recruit in a modern environment. And we're seeing a lot of government organizations that are very intent on changing that. Also, the whole area of skill development and training. The workforce that is eligible to retire in public sector has been talked about for quite some time. But now we're seeing it to begin to really happen, and that's leaving a lot of management skills that are going unfilled. So there is renewed effort to look at all the skills across a public sector organization and to understand how they can match skills better with available positions or offer the training that will increase and improve those skills, not only of what you want to bring in from the outside to your workforce, but also in how you want to promote your internal workforce and the whole area of key talent retention. So compensation planning, another big area, benefit planning, cross-agency workforce analytics. As Nick said, a lot of silos have developed, and many agencies have their own processes, they have their own HR folks, and now really government organizations really want to look across agencies and begin to understand the total makeup of the total workforce that is across agencies and how that might be utilized better, shared better, maybe make transfers easier, et cetera. In the area of organizational structure and management, we've certainly seen a lot of movement towards shared service centers where it makes sense. So it may be a benefits shared service center or a general HR shared service center. But many government organizations certainly don't want to lose that level of service that specific agencies still require. So this whole concept of agility in the ability to have your system be able to accommodate the changes that are in play now and that organizations want to make in the future, but also still be, specific and relevant to a specific agency's needs. And of course, the whole area of mobile workers and telework and social media, people just simply expect to be able to interact in this way. And so these are the kind of solutions that people are looking for. So when you bring this concept of sort of unified solutions and unified data across all of your functions, whether it is recruiting or talent or comp or performance or budgeting or financial reporting or regulatory reporting, you do now have the ability to have this true real-time visibility into your capacity, your cost, your capability, and the entire quality of your workforce. And so this can allow you really to align better to those agency-wide strategies, really have real-time data decision-making at your fingertips that's data-driven, increased user adoption because of the intuitive, interactive way that modern solutions can deliver the information to your users. And if we just, one example I hear about quite a bit that I think really sort of highlights this area of unified data is the whole area of vacancy planning or salary lapse savings and how that's looked at, how that's dealt with in different organizations. And so I hear a lot that we put our managers through horrible processes at the end of every month because no one really knows what positions are filled, unfilled, underfilled, and we use salary savings as a budget tool at the start of the year. We make assumptions that so much percent of the positions will not be filled on time, and then there's an extreme difficulty to match up whether or not you actually are managing to a budget that includes an assumed level of salary savings or whether you're really managing to your HR needs and talent. And I think Nick mentioned that earlier as well. And so solutions these days can make those issues much, much easier to deal with, where you have real-time information available to you at any given point what your actual salary savings are. So these are a lot of things that we are talking to our customers about when we're talking about what they're trying to do in workforce management. And then when we talk about cloud specifically and the benefits that cloud solutions can bring to the government organization, really a true cloud solution is a unified solution that is modern, it's mobile, it's social, and it's always keeping you on a current release, so it is future-proof. You're going to get the newest innovations. You don't have to deal with the old upgrade processes. You're going to get better service levels with the lower operating costs, and there are quite a number of business benefits to the utilization of these types of solutions as well. Now, also on the technical side, a lot of business users don't think about these things, but certainly the IT staff does. So when you move into the cloud with ERP-like solutions, here's what's happening technically. So no longer does your IT staff have to struggle with this IT infrastructure because we manage it all for you. That includes all upgrades, patches, network, storage, security, world-class security, and another area that a lot of people don't think about, but that is disaster recovery. A lot of governments struggle with trying to make sure that they have disaster recovery capabilities in their IT environments. And we actually did have a customer that the day after Superstorm Sandy hit, they were able to get payroll out because they did not have to deal with disaster recovery of on-premise systems. They were on Workday. So there is a lot to think about as you think about cloud and what you're trying to do in your organization. We're certainly happy to come out and talk to you about what our customers are doing, what we're seeing in the marketplace. And I know we want to leave some time here for questions as well, Harold. So I think with that, I will turn it back to you, and our slides will be available to the audience, I think.
Thank you so much, Sherry. What a wonderful presentation from both of you all, and I appreciate it. So let's delve right into the questions. The first one that is asked, for both of you, and Sherry, maybe you can address it first, what technologies are there other than cloud? You both spoke a lot about the cloud and the cloud as the future, but there's a question, should the organization consider other alternatives?
Well, I think certainly what is most prevalent today are what we call on-premise installed systems. And these are systems that generally were built about 20 years ago in the last great turn of technology, systems like PeopleSoft. There are many others out there that customers have installed today. But I think when you look at all of the newer solutions that are coming out, they are coming out in a cloud environment, whether that's what we call a true cloud environment, like Workday, which is all customers on the same release, or sometimes we do see governments moving to what they call a managed hosted environment. So they might take the on-premise applications they've been using and they might move those off to a third party to manage the technology, but they still manage the application. But certainly all of the movement in newer solutions that are coming out today, it's almost all cloud-based. Nick?
Sure, yeah, and to follow on with what Sherry said, we do study organizations how they've deployed their solutions, whether they're in the cloud or hosted or on-premise. And over the past, several years that I've been here at Aberdeen and even before, we have seen that organizations today are becoming more and more likely to select a cloud solution for their next solution beyond what they've done with on-premise in the past, for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, why it's more attractive, quicker to implement, less of a need for IT resources, lower cost, the ability to pay on a subscription basis in some cases, constantly updated and scalable. So what we're seeing is more and more organizations are going to the cloud going forward.
Nick, are you seeing organizations do a hybrid solution for the cloud and using sort of a software as a service platform?
Sure, but a lot of times it's more for organizations that are not in the public sector. It's a lot of manufacturing organizations that are starting new business units that are using a hybrid solution to get new plants up and running as quickly as possible. Or there are times when organizations are using multiple applications where some of those applications are on-premise, some of those applications are on the cloud. But point being, more organizations are at least having some aspect of their technology infrastructure based in the cloud.
Let me ask you both a question. As you all know, I'm a retired Chief Information Officer in the public sector. And as it relates to systems in the cloud, and in this case we're talking human resource systems, the first discussion that comes up with the business owner is about security, the concern about security. Who has access? Who doesn't have access? Is access controlled? And in large public sector entities, those employees also include law enforcement personnel. Some of them are undercover and things of that nature. Let's start with you, Sherry. How do you help the IT side of government have the conversation with the business owners about all the concerns that typically come up regarding security associated with cloud systems?
I'm engaged in a number of those conversations in the marketplace, and so I'll talk just a little bit from that perspective in general. And I think the first thing is, and you mentioned it, Harold, you have to understand the kind of data that you're dealing with, because some data will need higher security levels than others. So you first want to understand the data. But secondly, all of the typical things that you have in business solutions, like access controls and user IDs and role-based access to certain functions and no access to other functions, those all exist in the cloud solutions as well, and they exist in our solution. And then you have this third level of security that IT folks are generally very concerned about, and that level of security deals with things like encrypting the data. And in the case specifically of Workday, we do several things to ensure chief security officers that we're highly secure. The first is that we're audited by independent third-party auditors as to our security structures and processes and technology. We're also ISO 27001 compliant, which also is an independent assessment of our security structures. And then last but not least is we actually encrypt all data in the system. We don't just specify personal or what's called PII, personal information. So all data in a Workday system is encrypted. So our levels of security are really world-class, and we have passed numerous security assessments. So I'll turn it over to Nick to see what you see as well, Nick.
Well, before Nick answers, I just want to make a comment on that. So then, based on those third-party assessments, then we can assume and also verify we were customers or potential customers that your Workday encrypts the data at rest as well as data in transit. Is that what you say?
That's correct. We do.
Thank you. Nick, do you have anything to say on the security side?
Sure. And we've asked for years reasons that organizations would be unwilling to select a cloud solution. And for many years, security was at the top. But year over year, those percentages have gone down and further down. And I think that's for a few different reasons. Number one, the whole livelihood of a cloud software vendor relies on them being able to provide that security to their customers. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in business. So these organizations are asking themselves, what's more secure, my own internal firewalls or the firewalls of an organization that's providing a secure solution for me? And that's why they're more and more likely to consider that, as well as employees being more likely to utilize the cloud for their own personal information. More and more people are utilizing online banking, and it's just kind of what's expected today. So that security concern has gone away quite a bit.
We have a time for maybe two questions, so hopefully I'm going to challenge you guys to respond briefly on both of these. So I want to be mindful of everyone's time on this hour. We have a question, and it has come up when I was working, from the elected officials particularly. So you work in public sector organizations, and elected officials and citizens in general have concerns about outsourcing and offshoring, not having the data in the United States. For whatever reason, they may have a concern about that. Sherry, have you all had to deal with questions like that, and if so, how have you addressed those?
Yes, we certainly do. And first of all, with Workday, the data is within the United States borders. So the data is stored within the United States. Now, what typically does happen, though, that customers need to be aware of is that if you want 24/7 customer support services, most companies that are large, viable companies are going to have service centers that are perhaps in other countries. And so you have these follow-the-sun support models. So the data is housed within the U.S., but you may have service representatives that are trying to assess a certain, problem that you've called in to report, and they may need to look at the data. But in general, we've had that conversation a lot, and again, we've been able to make our customers quite comfortable that we're as secure as we can be. Now, we did at one point in time see states want to implement requirements that data had to sit within the state. And the first couple that did that found that they got no responses to any of their bids because that's just not viable, for most companies to put a data center in all 50 states. So, but so far we're good on that point, and that's a very good question, Harold.
Thank you. And Nick, let me toss the final question to you. As a research analyst and consultant, organizations would look at products such as Workday, like what we heard about it today. How can you emphasize to them that they need to make sure they change their business processes to work and configure the software as opposed to requesting customization so that the software can fit their old way of doing things?
Sure, and it depends on the nature of their business itself and how similar it is to other Workday customers. Workday is providing, and other software vendors as well, are providing solutions that support best practices based on their customer base. These organizations should understand as they look to implement a new solution that these best practices may not be exactly what they've been doing in the past, but they're designed to be the best possible thing that can help your organization. So if you see a lot of my research, I very strongly recommend against customization and understanding and working with your software vendor to put together a solution or work with the solution that's available that's going to make your organization work as efficiently as possible. So customization is really something that should only be a last resort.
Thank you. I want to thank our speakers, Nick Castellina and Sherry Amos today, for addressing a very timely webinar subject, Investing in Technologies Today to Future-Proof the Workforce for Tomorrow. We ran a little over. I apologize for that, but the topic was very interesting. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at a future Government Technology and the Center for Digital Government webinar. Enjoy your day.